The wind howled as Captain Rorik Marlowe stood at the helm of his ship, the Black Runner. His eyes narrowed as he scanned the horizon, where dark clouds twisted in unnatural shapes, signaling the storm that was already brewing. Rorik was no stranger to the dangers of the sea. His long, salt-streaked hair whipped around his face, and the scar that ran down his cheek gleamed white against his sun-tanned skin. His tall, muscular frame cast a shadow against the dimming sky, his hands gripping the wheel with the kind of strength earned from years of surviving the unforgiving ocean. "Prepare for a rough ride, lads," he shouted to his crew, his voice like thunder, echoing through the chaos. His crew, a band of weathered pirates, moved swiftly in response, securing the sails and bracing for the coming storm. Rorik's ship was a creature of the sea, sleek and powerful, built for speed and for battle. But today, it was not the storm that gripped Rorik's mind. It was something far more dangerous and far more elusive, a rumor he had heard in the last port. Whispers of a mystical mermaid, one bound in chains and trapped in the gladiator pits of an island fortress. A mermaid who had once ruled the kingdom beneath the waves. He had no interest in slaves, no interest in rescuing anyone, but something about the tale had pulled at him, as though fate itself had cast its net around him, drawing him towards something he couldn't understand. The sea had always been his mistress, but today it felt like she was calling him to something far greater. Below the deck, Coralina sat in the cold, dark confines of her cage. Her silken tail, once a thing of beauty, now lay pale and lifeless beneath her, chained to the floor by enchanted manacles. Her long, emerald hair hung in wet strands around her face, her skin a soft seafoam hue that had once glowed like the moonlit sea. Her large, deep blue eyes stared blankly ahead, filled with sorrow that had been there for so long it had become a part of her. The vibrant coral necklace she wore, a symbol of her once great kingdom, was now a dull, broken thing. For years, she had been treated as nothing more than an object, something to be gawked at and feared. She had been a princess of the Mermaids, born to rule beneath the waves, but now she was nothing but a slave. The magic that once flowed freely through her was now bound by chains, her power sealed away by dark enchantments. She had once dreamed of freedom, but the dream had faded like the distant echo of a forgotten song. As the ship rocked violently with the wind's fury, Coralina's heart raced. She had heard the sounds of the storm above, but she had grown used to the fear it caused. It was just another storm in a life filled with storms. But today, something felt different. Suddenly, the ship lurched as though it had struck something. The noise of cracking wood filled the air, and Coralina's cage was tossed sideways. The chains clinked loudly, and for the first time in months, she felt something other than the weight of despair. Rorik's voice echoed from above. "Bring her up," he commanded, his tone sharp, as though he had been expecting this moment. A door opened, and Coralina was pulled from the darkness into the sunlight, her eyes squinting against the harsh rays. She was dragged to the deck, where she was met by the harsh stares of the pirates, their eyes filled with curiosity and greed. Rorik stood before her, his dark eyes piercing her like a storm of their own. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a gaze that seemed to hold all the rage of the ocean itself. He looked at her, and for a moment, their eyes locked. There was something in his gaze, something that wasn't the usual disdain or pity he had shown others he had freed. It was an unspoken understanding. Coralina felt a strange flutter in her chest, something that reminded her of the waves, vast, powerful, and unpredictable. She had lived her life in the deep, beneath the waves, but now, for the first time in years, she felt as though she were standing on the edge of something new, something unknown. Rorik's voice broke the silence. "I'll pay for you," he said, his words heavy with authority. "You're free now." Free. The word echoed in Coralina's mind, but she could not grasp it. She had been a slave for so long that the idea of freedom seemed impossible. But as the pirate captain turned away, the chains that had bound her for so long began to feel like a distant memory. And in that fleeting moment, as the storm raged around them, something deep inside Coralina stirred. Maybe, just maybe, the sea had a plan for her after all. The storm raged overhead, casting a veil of darkness over the Black Runner. The ship rocked violently against the crashing waves, its crew scrambling to keep the vessel steady. Captain Rorik Marlowe stood firm at the wheel, his jaw clenched as his eyes scanned the turbulent sea. The wind howled in his ears, whipping his long, salt-streaked hair around his face, but he paid it no mind. He was used to the fury of the ocean. It was the girl, the mermaid, that troubled him. Her name was Coralina, and she stood now, free from the chains that had bound her for so long, but still trapped in a world that didn't belong to her. Her shimmering tail, once a brilliant shade of emerald, now lay limp and dull, its radiance dimmed by years of captivity. Her ocean blue eyes, wide and uncertain, watched the crew with a mixture of fear and wonder. She had never known freedom, not like this. Rorik's gaze lingered on her for a moment. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected her to be so fragile. In the rumors he had heard, he had been a creature of beauty and power, a queen of the sea, but now, as he saw her standing on his ship, she seemed nothing like the myth he had imagined. She was small, fragile even, like the glassy waves at dawn. And yet, in her gaze, there was something fierce, something ancient, that called to him. As the ship sailed further into the open sea, the storm began to calm, but the air between Rorik and Coralina remained thick with tension. She stood at the railing, her gaze fixed on the endless expanse of water ahead. The salty wind tugged at her long, dark hair, and she shivered, though the temperature had risen. She had not yet spoken, but Rorik could see the questions in her eyes, the mistrust, the fear. "You must be wondering why I did it," Rorik said, his voice rough like the sea itself. He stepped closer, but not too close. "I didn't free you for any treasure, or for any reward." Coralina didn't answer. She merely looked at him, her lips pressed into a thin line. She didn't trust him. She couldn't. Pirates were thieves, destroyers, and conquerors. Why would this one be any different? But there was something about him, something in the way he looked at her, that kept her from running. It was as if the storm had calmed for the first time in her heart. Rorik sighed, his gaze softening. He could see the doubt in her eyes, but also the flicker of something else, a glimmer of hope, just the slightest hint of trust. He knew that the ocean, wild and untamable, ran in her veins. She was like the tide, forever shifting, always unpredictable. "I've made a bargain, Coralina," he said, his voice low but steady. "I paid Vargos Lorn for your freedom, but there's a price. Not for you, for me." He paused, glancing at the horizon where the sky was beginning to lighten with the promise of dawn. "I'm not some noble hero. I'm just a pirate who's tired of living in the shadows. I'm tired of the endless blood and gold." Coralina turned to face him then, her blue eyes searching his face. The wind tossed her hair around, and for a moment she looked like a creature of the sea, wild and untamed. Her gaze softened, and her voice, when it came, was as gentle as the waves. "You don't know what it means to be free," she said, her words barely a whisper over the wind. "To me, freedom isn't a gift. It's a curse. I'm no longer the princess I once was. I'm just lost." Rorik didn't know how to respond. His own heart was heavy with his past. So many battles, so many lost years chasing treasure and power. But in that moment, as he stood facing her, he understood the weight she carried. She wasn't just a mermaid. She was a broken soul, drifting between two worlds. A world of freedom that was as dangerous as it was beautiful. "I didn't buy you, Coralina," he said, his voice softer now. "I bought your chance to choose what comes next. No chains, no captors, just your choice." Coralina looked out at the open sea, her thoughts a swirl of confusion. The ocean was vast, boundless, and it was the only home she had ever known. But that world, her kingdom beneath the waves, had been lost to her. She had been a queen once, but now she was a shadow, a forgotten legend. Could she ever return? Could she ever be free? Rorik watched her, a silent understanding passing between them. He wasn't asking her to trust him, not yet. He wasn't asking her to love him. He was only offering her a chance to live without chains. The ship cut through the calm sea, the light of dawn slowly painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. And as the horizon stretched before them, Coralina felt a stirring in her chest, a hope, fragile but persistent, that maybe, just maybe, The sea had more to offer than endless darkness. For the first time in years, she dared to believe in something more than the waves. The wind had shifted, and with it, the mood aboard the Black Tidorunner. The once turbulent sea had calmed into a glassy, endless expanse, reflecting the fiery hues of the setting sun. But despite the peace in the air, there was a storm brewing beneath the surface, a storm within Coralina's heart. She stood at the edge of the ship, her slender fingers gripping the railing as her deep blue eyes gazed out over the water. Her long, dark hair, now free from the damp tangle of captivity, flowed around her, catching the golden light of the evening. Her once pale tail, though still dimmed by years of imprisonment, shimmered faintly beneath the surface of the water. She had not yet spoken much since her release, and Rorik knew it wasn't just distrust that kept her silent. She was afraid of the freedom he had given her, of the vast world that lay before her, unknown and uncertain. Rorik leaned against the mast, watching her with a steady gaze. There was something about her that was different from the stories he had heard. The legends spoke of fierce, untamable creatures of the sea, beautiful and deadly. Yet here was Coralina, a broken soul, carrying the weight of her lost kingdom in her eyes, her heart heavier than the ocean itself. He had freed her, but what had he truly given her? The chains had been broken, but the scars of captivity were still fresh in her mind. He couldn't deny the pull he felt toward her. There was a connection between them, something deeper than mere attraction. It was as if the sea itself had woven their fates together, and no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were meant to be here, together, at the edge of this new world. Do you remember the first time you touched the ocean? Rorik's voice broke the silence, low and soft, like the distant whisper of the waves. Coralina glanced over her shoulder, her eyes meeting his. She said nothing at first, but the question lingered between them. She had spent so many years locked away, trapped in darkness, that the memories of her past had become like dreams, fading and uncertain. But the ocean was something she had always known. It had been her home, her kingdom, before everything had been stolen from her. I was just a child, she whispered, her voice like the sound of distant tides. I remember the first time I swam in the open sea, the freedom of it, the power in my tail as it cut through the water, the salt in the air, the endless horizon. I felt like I could conquer the world. Rorik stepped closer, his eyes never leaving her face. And then they took that from you. Coralina turned fully to face him now, her gaze steady but tinged with sorrow. They took everything, my people, my home, and my magic. I was a princess. But now I am nothing, a broken creature. Her words hit Rorik like a wave crashing against a rock. She didn't see herself as a queen, as a being of power and grace. She saw herself as a shadow of what she had been, and in that moment, he understood something he had before. Freedom wasn't enough for her. The chains had been broken, but the cage still existed within her heart. Rorik's voice was softer now, his tone gentler, though the fire of the pirate in him still burned in his chest. You may not feel like it now, but you're not nothing. You are still the sea's daughter, Coralina. And that power, that magic, it's still inside you. She looked at him, her brow furrowing slightly. How can you be so sure? Because I've seen it in your eyes, Rorik said. The ocean runs through your veins. The sea speaks to you in ways I could never understand. You're not broken. You're just lost. And I'm here to help you find your way. The words were simple, but they held a weight that seemed to settle between them. Coralina's heart, heavy with doubts and pain, softened just a fraction. She had never known kindness like this, not in all her years of captivity. The pirate, the man who had freed her, stood before her now, not as a conqueror, but as an ally. The thought was unfamiliar and strange, but not entirely unwelcome. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the gentle creaking of the ship and the soft lapping of the water against its hull. Coralina felt the weight of the ocean beneath her feet, the vastness of it stretching far beyond the horizon. She had spent so long longing for freedom, but now, in this moment, she realized that freedom was not just about escaping her chains. It was about reclaiming herself, about finding her place in the world again. Rorik, sensing her shift, took a step forward. If you'll let me, I'll help you. Whatever comes next, The sea is vast, Coralina, but you're not alone anymore. The ship sliced through the waves, its sails billowing in the wind, and the sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm glow over the crew. The storm had passed, but there was an unsettling stillness in the air, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Coralina stood at the edge of the ship again, her eyes scanning the horizon. The ocean, vast and endless, stretched before her, and yet it felt smaller somehow, less like a kingdom and more like a place she no longer belonged. She had never been far from the depths of the sea before. Her life had been one of the coral palaces and deep water caverns, where every current told a story and every tide carried ancient wisdom. But now, standing on this pirate ship, she was a stranger to the ocean, as if the world had shifted beneath her feet. Rorik stood nearby, watching her. He was the same as always, rugged, weather-worn, and commanding, his tall frame a fixture against the backdrop of the open sea. His eyes, though, held something new when he looked at her, an understanding, an unspoken connection that had only deepened since that night he had freed her from her chains. He had saved her, yes, but now it seemed he was becoming something more, something that pulled her closer to him, even though she resisted it. "Where are we going, Captain?" Coralina's voice was soft, her words carrying the weight of an ocean's worth of questions. She wasn't just asking about the destination. She was asking about herself, about where she was going now that she had been freed, now that her chains were gone, but her past remained. Rorik's gaze never wavered as he stared into the endless blue before them. "Wherever the sea takes us," he said, his voice steady, but there was a flicker in his eyes, a hint of something deeper, something more than just the pirate's desire for adventure. Coralina turned to him, her eyes searching his face. "And what if the sea takes me away from here?" Her heart was heavy as the words left her lips. She had known the ocean for as long as she could remember. She had swum with its currents, danced with its storms. But now the thought of leaving it behind was as frightening as it was freeing. Rorik's expression softened, his usual pirate bravado giving way to something more tender. "The sea doesn't take you away from things. It brings you to where you're meant to be." He stepped closer to her, his voice low but steady, like the rumble of thunder on the horizon. "Maybe the ocean is showing you something new. Maybe it's showing you me." Coralina felt a strange flutter in her chest, as if her heart had become one with the rhythm of the waves. She turned away quickly, her gaze fixed on the distant horizon, but her thoughts were scattered like the drifting sea foam. "I don't know what to believe anymore," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of the wind. "I was a princess, Captain. I ruled the sea, but now I'm just a lost soul. I don't know how to be free." Rorik's eyes softened with understanding. He had seen it in her, the lingering doubt, the fear that her freedom wasn't enough. But he also saw something else, something stronger than the chains that had once bound her. "You are free, Coralina," he said, his voice unwavering. "You might not feel it yet, but you are. And no one can take that from you, not even the sea." Coralina looked at him then, her eyes searching his face for the truth in his words. There was no lie in his gaze, no pretense, just a man who had seen the worst of the world and somehow still believed in something greater, something worth fighting for, something like her. She swallowed hard, the weight in her chest lifting ever so slightly. The warmth of the sun on her skin felt different now, less like a distant memory and more like a promise. "Maybe," she said, her voice a bit stronger now, "I can believe in that." Rorik smiled, a small, genuine smile that softened the hard edges of his weathered face. "Good," he said. "Then maybe we're both in the right place after all." For a long moment they stood in silence, the wind picking up around them as the ship sailed forward. The ocean whispered its secrets in the distance, its waves rolling with a rhythm that felt almost familiar to Coralina now. The deep, endless blue of the sea stretched before her, and though the weight of her past still lingered, she felt something new stirring inside her, a hope, fragile but growing. The ocean wasn't just a place to escape, it was a place to begin again. As the ship sailed into the night, the stars above them seemed brighter than ever before, and Coralina, for the first time since her world had been torn apart, felt the spark of something that had been lost for far too long. Hope. The night was quiet, save for the gentle creak of the ship and the soft lapping of the water against its hull. The moon hung low in the sky, casting its pale light over the black Tidorunner, its silver rays shimmering on the surface of the sea. Coralina stood at the ship's bow once again, her dark hair blowing gently in the breeze, her gaze lost in the vastness of the ocean. It felt like home to her, even though it was no longer the home she had once known. It was as though the ocean itself had whispered its secrets to her, secrets she wasn't yet ready to understand. Rorik leaned against the mast, watching her in silence. The distance between them was still there, though it wasn't the physical space that separated them now. It was something deeper, something hidden in her eyes. He had seen it before, the way she looked at the sea, as though it held both comfort and pain. He knew the ocean had been both her cradle and her prison. And now, standing in this strange new world, she was torn between what she had lost and what she had yet to find. "Why do you always stand there?" Rorik's voice broke the silence, soft yet sharp enough to pull her from her thoughts. Coralina turned slightly to look at him, her brow furrowing in confusion. "What do you mean?" "You've spent every night since you were freed staring out at the sea," he said, his tone a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Don't you ever wonder what's beyond it?" Coralina took a deep breath, the scent of salt and seaweed filling her lungs. "I've seen it all," she said quietly. "The sea holds every corner of the world I've known. There's nothing beyond it that I want." Rorik pushed off the mast and walked toward her, his boots creaking on the deck with each step. "There's always more, Coralina," he said, his voice low and intense. "The ocean's depths are endless, but they don't hold everything. Some things," he paused, his gaze meeting hers, "are found in the places we never thought to look." Her heart fluttered at his words, but she didn't let it show. She wasn't ready to trust him fully, not yet. Not with her heart, not with her pain. "You think I'm just lost," she said, her voice quieter now, almost a whisper over the wind. "That I need to be saved." Rorik was silent for a moment, his gaze fixed on her. The light of the moon caught the edges of her features, giving her an ethereal glow. She was beautiful, more than he had ever imagined, but it wasn't her beauty that pulled him in. It was her sorrow, the weight of the life she had lost. It was in the way she wore her pain, like an invisible cloak. "No," he said finally, his voice softer now. "I think you're stronger than you know. You don't need saving, Coralina. But maybe, just maybe, you need someone to stand with you. Someone who sees you for who you are now, not just for who you were." She turned to face him fully, her eyes searching his face. There was no pretense in his words, no desire to possess her or claim her heart. He was offering something else, a bond, a partnership, a shared journey. "Do you really think I can be more than what I've become?" she asked, her voice laced with doubt. Rorik nodded, stepping closer until the distance between them was almost nothing. His presence was like the ocean itself, unpredictable, yet constant. "I do. The sea didn't just give you power, Coralina. It gave you a gift, one you haven't even begun to understand yet. There's more to you than chains and memories. There's a part of you that's wild and untamed, just like the ocean." For the first time in weeks, Coralina felt a spark of something deeper than the sadness that had haunted her. A warmth spread through her chest, something that had been buried beneath years of fear and loss. She didn't know if it was hope or just the pull of the man standing before her, but she couldn't deny that it felt real. Her voice was barely above a whisper as she said, "What if I'm not ready to find that part of me? What if I'm afraid?" Rorik's gaze softened, and for a brief moment, the pirate inside him disappeared, leaving only a man who understood her struggle. "Then you take it one step at a time," he said gently. "The ocean doesn't rush, Coralina. It's constant, like time. It moves, it shifts, but it never forces its way. You don't have to be ready. Not yet. Not if you're not ready." Coralina's heart beat a little faster, the unspoken promise between them growing stronger. The air between them was charged now, filled with the weight of something neither of them had expected. It wasn't just freedom that had brought her here. It was something more, a connection, however fragile, that neither the sea nor the winds could easily tear apart. The wind had shifted once more, and the scent of the sea had turned colder, as if it were holding its breath in anticipation. The sky, once a deep blue, had turned a muted gray, casting an eerie light over the black Tidorunner. The crew moved with quiet efficiency, preparing the ship for the storm that loomed on the horizon. Yet, amidst the brewing tempest, Coralina stood alone on the ship's deck, her eyes fixed on the wild, shifting waters beneath her. Her long, dark hair whipped around her face, tangling in the wind. The mermaid's eyes were deep, endless like the ocean, reflecting both its beauty and its terror. She had begun to change in the days since her freedom. Something inside her had begun to stir, as though the ocean was awakening her from a deep, forgotten slumber. But with that awakening had come a new fear. The sea was vast, wild, and unpredictable, and though it called to her, it also held dangers she wasn't sure she was ready to face. Rorik stood a few paces away, watching her in silence. He had seen the changes in her too, the way her shoulders had slowly straightened, the way her gaze had become sharper, more certain. But it was still clear she was struggling to find herself in the wreckage of her past. The storm was a reflection of her inner turmoil, and Rorik knew it was only a matter of time before she would have to face the darkness in her heart. He walked toward her, his boots thudding softly against the wet deck. The wind was picking up, and the sky darkened as the storm drew nearer. Coralina didn't notice him until he was right beside her. "You can feel it, can't you?" Rorik's voice was low, but it carried the weight of years spent on the sea. Coralina's eyes flickered to him, her brow furrowing. "The storm?" she asked, her voice distant, as though she were lost in some faraway thought. "The storm inside you," he replied, his gaze never leaving hers. He knew what she was feeling. He had seen it in the eyes of sailors before, in the eyes of men who had seen too many battles, too many storms. The feeling of being pulled between two worlds. One was the world she had come from, full of rules, expectations, and a kingdom lost to time. The other was the world she was now part of, a world of freedom, of the open sea, but also of uncertainty and danger. Coralina closed her eyes, drawing a deep breath. The storm was not just a force of nature. It was a reflection of her own confusion, her own fear of what she had become. Her once proud mermaid tale, now hidden beneath the folds of a simple gown, still ached with the memory of her underwater home. She longed for the water, for the cool, comforting embrace of the deep ocean, but at the same time she feared it. It had betrayed her, taken everything from her, and yet she knew that it was the only place where she could ever truly be whole again. "I don't know who I am anymore," Coralina whispered, her voice trembling with a vulnerability she had not shown before. "I thought that being free would feel different. I thought I'd feel like myself again, but instead I feel lost." Rorik's expression softened, and for a moment he forgot that he was a pirate, forgot about the rough seas, the treasure, the endless pursuit of freedom. In that moment, he was just a man who understood what it was like to be broken. "You're not lost," he said gently, stepping closer to her. "You're just finding your way. It takes time. You don't have to know everything right now, Coralina. The sea doesn't rush, and neither should you." She turned to him then, her eyes searching his face. The storm in her heart mirrored the storm that was now raging in the sky. But his words, his calm, steady presence, felt like an anchor in the chaos. "Why do you stay?" Coralina's voice cracked slightly, and she looked away, embarrassed by the rawness of her question. "Why do you care? You've saved me, freed me from my chains, and yet you still stay by my side. Why?" Rorik didn't hesitate. He took another step closer, his hand reaching out to gently grasp her arm, steadying her as the ship rocked with the increasing force of the wind. His touch was firm, warm, a silent promise. "Because I see you, Coralina," he said, his voice steady but low, filled with something deeper than words. "Not as the mermaid princess you were, not as the creature who was caged and broken. I see you as you are now, and I believe in what you can become. You're stronger than you know. You're not lost. You're just waiting for the storm to pass." The words lingered in the air between them, heavy with meaning, and for the first time, Coralina felt the weight of her own fear lift just a little. Rorik wasn't asking her to be someone she wasn't. He wasn't asking her to hurry through her pain. He was offering her something more. He was offering her patience. He was offering her the kind of understanding she had never known. The storm had passed, leaving the sea calm but turbulent with whispers beneath its surface. The skies were now a soft violet, streaked with the last traces of the dying storm. The crew of the Black Tidorunner worked diligently, their movements sharp and practiced, repairing the sails and securing the rigging. But amidst the chaos of the aftermath, one figure stood still at the edge of the ship's deck, her eyes fixed on the horizon. Coralina had changed since that night. The pain, though still there, had started to settle into something deeper, something more reflective. The ocean that once felt like a cage now called to her like a familiar, distant voice. She could feel its presence around her, beneath the waves, always there waiting. She was no longer just a creature of the deep. She was something else now, something that couldn't quite be explained. And it frightened her. Her eyes caught a glimmer on the water's surface, a brief flash of silver. A shoal of fish swam past, their scales catching the light. It reminded her of the beauty and serenity she had once known when the ocean had been her kingdom, before everything had been taken from her. A shadow fell over her, and Coralina turned to find Rorik standing just behind her. His usual pirate swagger was softened today, as though he too had changed in the wake of the storm. He looked out at the ocean beside her, his presence steady and reassuring. "You're quieter than usual," Rorik said, his voice carrying the warmth that cut through the cool sea breeze. His gaze never left the water, though it was clear he was watching her more than the waves. Coralina hesitated, her fingers trailing along the edge of the ship's railing as she searched for the right words. "I'm just thinking," she said softly, her voice distant. "I never thought I'd be here, on a pirate ship, traveling through unknown seas. Everything has changed so quickly." Rorik nodded slowly, his brow furrowing in quiet understanding. "It's a lot to take in. The ocean has a way of changing people, but maybe it's for the best." He finally turned to look at her, his expression gentle, his eyes reflecting the deep blue of the sea. "You don't have to know everything right now, Coralina. The sea will show you what you need when you're ready to see it." Her gaze met his, and for a moment, the world felt still. There was something in his words, something deep and steady. A quiet promise, like the tide returning to shore, bringing what was lost. "What if I don't know if I'll ever be ready?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The vulnerability in her words hung in the air between them. Rorik stepped closer, his boots barely making a sound on the deck. He placed a hand on the railing beside hers, their fingers brushing for the briefest of moments. Coralina's breath hitched, and she quickly pulled her hand back, though her heart raced. It was as if that touch had sparked something inside her, something that had been buried beneath the weight of her past, but was slowly waking. "Then take your time," he said, his voice low and soothing. "I'm not going anywhere. I've seen the storm in your eyes, Coralina, but I've also seen the calm that comes after it. You're stronger than you think, and you don't have to face this alone." She turned to him, her heart swelling with emotion. She had never known anyone who could make her feel as if her struggles were understood. There was no judgment in Rorik's eyes, no expectation, just acceptance, and perhaps something more. "I'm afraid," she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. "Afraid of what the ocean will reveal to me, afraid of what I'll find deep inside myself." Rorik studied her for a long moment, his gaze softening. He reached out, brushing a lock of her hair behind her ear with the gentleness of someone who had touched the sea's waves 1,000 times. "The ocean is unpredictable, just like you," he said quietly. "But sometimes what we fear the most is what we need to face. And when you're ready, I'll be here. The sea, too, will always be here waiting." For a moment, they stood together in silence, the sound of the waves soothing their hearts. Coralina could feel the pull of the ocean once again, deeper this time. It wasn't a call to escape, but a call to return to something she had forgotten, and Rorik's presence, steady and unwavering beside her, made it a little easier to hear the ocean's whispers. She nodded slowly, the weight of her fear beginning to lessen. I think I'm ready to hear it," she said, her voice soft but filled with a newfound strength. Rorik gave her a small smile, a glimmer of pride in his eyes. "Good," he said simply. "Then we'll face it together." The sun had begun to set, painting the sky with hues of gold, lavender, and deep indigo. The ocean, once dark and stormy, now shimmered under the fading light, its surface smooth like glass. The black Tidorunner sailed steadily, its black sails billowing in the soft evening breeze. But the true heart of the journey had only just begun. Coralina stood at the bow, her long, dark hair flowing freely in the wind, her gaze fixed on the endless expanse before her. The ocean felt different now, alive, almost sentient, as if it were whispering secrets only she could understand. She had spent so many years running from it, but now, for the first time, it felt like home. The sea had a way of pulling at the heartstrings, and Coralina could feel its call deep within her soul. Her transformation was more than just physical. Her once fragile heart had started to heal, piece by piece, like the ocean's waves washing away the remnants of the past. She had found a new strength, one that was not born from the chains she had worn, but from the freedom she had earned. Rorik stood beside her, leaning against the mast, his arms crossed over his chest. His eyes were trained on the horizon, but there was something different in the way he watched her now. He no longer saw the broken mermaid who had stumbled onto the ship that night. No, now he saw her, a woman who had been forged by the sea, a woman who had found her place in the world. For a moment, the two of them stood in silence, the ship rocking gently beneath their feet. The crew moved about the deck, their voices blending into the rhythm of the sea, but it was as if Coralina and Rorik were the only ones aboard. Finally, Rorik spoke, his voice low, but filled with the weight of unspoken emotions. "The ocean is still full of mysteries, Coralina," he said, his eyes never leaving the horizon. "It holds more than we can ever know. But one thing I've learned is that we can't wait for the sea to tell us everything. Sometimes we have to dive in, trusting that the water will guide us." Coralina glanced at him, her heart fluttering at the sound of his voice, at the way his words wrapped around her like the very sea they sailed upon. "And what if we drown?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Rorik turned his head, his gaze meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Then we sink together," he said simply. "But at least we'll know we were both willing to dive." For a long moment, Coralina felt the weight of his words sink into her heart. There was something comforting in the idea that she wasn't alone, that she could trust someone to stand beside her, even in the deepest, most dangerous parts of the ocean. And yet, as much as she wanted to believe in that promise, there was a part of her that still feared the unknown, still feared what might lie beneath the surface of her own heart. "I don't know if I'm ready to face everything," Coralina admitted, her voice trembling with the vulnerability she had so often hidden away. "I'm not sure I can ever forget everything I've lost." Rorik stepped closer to her, his presence steady, like a lighthouse guiding her through the storm. He reached out, gently brushing a stray lock of hair from her face, his fingers lingering on her skin in a touch that felt both tender and certain. "You don't have to forget," he said softly. "Your past is part of who you are, but it doesn't have to control you. The sea doesn't forget its storms, Coralina. It just learns to move on." Coralina swallowed, the tightness in her chest easing slightly. His words were like the calm after a storm, soothing and steady. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear them until now. She looked at him, her heart racing, her feelings more intense than she could put into words. In the way he spoke, in the way he had stood by her through every storm, he had become her anchor, and perhaps, just perhaps, he had found a way into her heart. Slowly, almost hesitantly, she reached out and placed her hand on his. The touch was simple, but it held everything they had both silently understood, the journey they had taken, the storms they had weathered, and the unspoken promise that they would face whatever came next, together. Rorik looked at her, his gaze softening, and for a moment, the world around them seemed to fade away. The ocean, the ship, the horizon, none of it mattered in that instant. It was just them, standing side by side, ready to face whatever the future might hold. "The sea is waiting for us," Rorik said, his voice a quiet promise. Coralina nodded, her heart lighter than it had been in years. "Then let's see where it takes us," she whispered. And together, they stood at the bow, the ship gliding forward into the unknown, with the endless ocean stretching before them, full of possibilities.